I spent the entire weekend supporting my newly single friend, but when I returned home, my partner was suspicious. Who would have thought that accompanying a friend would cause so much strain on my marriage? It really hurts. I never expected things to take such a terrible turn. If only I hadn't gone to my friend's place, but then again, there was no way to avoid it. He needed me, and I couldn't let him down. Before you jump to conclusions, let me explain. My name is Mia, and my husband is Owen. We've been married for a year. Owen is the type of guy who can always make you laugh. He has the perfect joke for any situation. But when it comes to our relationship, he's serious. He believes in honesty, fairness, and trust, and I do too. I felt like we were completely aligned, always on the same page until that weekend. That weekend was the start of a mess I never saw coming. It was Friday evening, and Owen had just returned from work. I don't work, so I had been at home all day. I was lounging on the couch, scrolling through my phone. After greeting Owen when he came in, I returned to my spot. I had already prepared dinner, so we were supposed to eat after he freshened up. I had placed the food on the table, but then my phone rang. It was Oliver. I remember thinking, why is he calling me now? But I shrugged and answered. At first, he didn't say anything, which was odd. Then I heard him take a shaky breath, and suddenly he started crying, full-on sobbing. Threw me off completely. Oliver is not the type to cry. He's always so put together. Hearing him like that broke my heart. I kept calling his name, trying to get him to speak, but his voice cracked, and it seemed like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Before I could ask what was going on, he ended the call abruptly. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. I stared at my phone in panic, my mind racing with questions. What had happened? Was he okay? Did something awful occur? I was about to call him back when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Oliver that read, "She's gone. Can't do this. I'm falling apart." My stomach sank. I knew he meant his fiancée. They had been together for years and were about to get married in just a few weeks. I couldn't even imagine the pain he was feeling. Without wasting any time, I rushed into the bedroom to change. Oliver's message really shook me. By the time Owen finished in the shower, he gave me a curious look and asked where I was going. I felt a bit awkward but explained that Oliver was devastated and needed me. I told him that Oliver's relationship had ended and that he sounded completely broken. I couldn't stop thinking about him crying on the phone. I needed to check on him. Owen paused for a moment and then asked, "Do you really have to go? Can't you just talk to him over the phone?" He wasn't saying no, just wondering if it was really that serious. Honestly, I wasn't sure how to explain it. I know Oliver well enough to understand that he's terrible at handling heartbreak. He bottles everything up and never lets anyone in until it's too much to bear. I knew I had to go. Oliver needed someone and I had to be there for him. Oliver and I have been friends for years, since high school and college. We were practically inseparable. Owen knew this too. Oliver had even given me a car as a wedding gift. My husband and I had socialized with Oliver and his fiancée. Our bond wasn't new. It had been built over years. Anyone who knew me could see how many times Oliver had been there for me when I was in trouble or needed help. Now that he was in pain, I had to be there for him. Owen sighed but agreed, giving me an exhausted, "Okay." He didn't try to stop me but asked me to be back in time for dinner. I promised him it would just be a quick check-in. I considered staying back and having dinner first to avoid disappointing him, but I couldn't leave Oliver in the state he was in. He needed me right away, and I couldn't risk him doing something reckless. So I grabbed my bag, kissed Owen on the cheek and left. As I drove to Oliver's place, I couldn't stop thinking about the text he had sent and how devastated he sounded. It's not every day you hear someone you care about break down like that. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. When I arrived at his place, I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time, but still nothing. My heart started racing with worry. I prayed he hadn't done anything to harm himself. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number as I knocked one final time, louder this time. Finally, I heard the sound of the door unlocking. Oliver opened it just enough for me to see his face. I couldn't believe how awful he looked. His eyes were swollen and red, with dark circles under them, as though he'd been crying for hours. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked back inside, leaving the door wide open behind him. When I stepped in, I was taken aback by the state of his place. It was a disaster. To call it a mess would be an understatement. It looked like someone had lost control there. There were pizza boxes and half-eaten leftovers scattered all over, empty bottles everywhere, mostly alcohol, and dirty clothes carelessly tossed on the couch. Smell. I couldn't even begin to describe how awful it was. It felt like something had been rotting for days. This was such a shock because Oliver is usually so neat and orderly. He's the type of person who wipes down the counters daily and arranges his books perfectly. But the Oliver I was seeing now was unrecognizable. I followed him inside, and he just collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the TV. He looked so lost. I didn't know what to say at first, so I sat down beside him for a moment, but the mess around me made it impossible to relax. So I got up and started tidying. I picked up the trash, folded his clothes, and did the dishes. The leftovers were the hardest to handle. It felt like an impossible task. Throughout it all, Oliver didn't look at me, not at first anyway. But after a while, I caught him glancing in my direction. He still didn't say much, but I could tell he was grateful for what I was doing. When I finished, I ordered us some food. I knew he hadn't eaten properly in days. We ate in silence, and I asked him how he was holding up after the breakup. At first he didn't want to talk, but after some coaxing he broke down. To see him, a 33-year-old man, sobbing and speaking in jumbled childlike words, was heartbreaking. He told me bits and pieces of the breakup, the things he could manage to say through his tears. It was tragic, but I was just glad to be there for him. Even if all I could do was clean up or sit by his side, I hoped it made him feel less alone. Sometimes all a person needs is someone to be there. I listened as he cried, offering a shoulder for him to lean on. I occasionally muttered, "I'm so sorry," but he quickly stopped me. He said it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't the one who had broken his heart, so I had no reason to apologize. I asked if he wanted me to help him talk to his ex-fiancée, and he told me she had blocked him on every platform. I thought that was absurd, so I tried to call her myself. To my surprise, I was blocked too. She clearly wanted nothing to do with him or anyone connected to him. Her refusal to answer made Oliver even more upset. He broke down further, and I tried to comfort him. I moved closer, rubbing his back and offering words of reassurance. He cried harder, asking me what he had done wrong to lose the love of his life. I pulled him into a tight embrace, trying to calm him. The weekend that changed everything. Telling him that he hadn't done anything wrong. In hindsight, I realized that was probably a mistake. As I pulled away, Oliver looked me in the eyes. His face contorted with emotion. His next words shocked me to my core. With tears still streaming down his face, he asked, "Why did we ever end up together?" I was too stunned to respond. I just stared at him, overwhelmed by the sudden shift in his words. He went on to tell me that we were perfect for each other, that I understood him like no one else, and that if we had been together we wouldn't be going through this. That was when I found my voice again. I told him to stop saying things he didn't mean, that it was just heartbreak talking, but he wasn't convinced. He believed we were more compatible, and I insisted he was just drunk, which he was since he had been drinking all day. To keep him from drinking more, I locked the fridge where the rest of the alcohol was, but he wouldn't listen. Looking at the time, I realized it was getting late, so I told Oliver I had to head home to have dinner with my husband. But as I started to leave, Oliver grabbed my arm and begged me not to go. I tried explaining that I had promised Owen I'd be home for dinner, but Oliver, with desperation in his voice, told me he was afraid he would do something drastic if he was alone. I didn't know what to do. I felt cornered. I had promised Owen, and the thought of breaking that promise felt wrong. As I stood there unsure, Oliver slumped further into the couch, making a soft, pitiful whimper, almost like a wounded animal. That was what broke me. I rushed back to him, asking what was wrong. He told me his heart hurt so badly, and he cried like a child. In that moment, I completely forgot about my promise to Owen. I tried to comfort him, helping him lie down on the couch. I grabbed a blanket from his room and covered him with it to keep him warm. But he told me he was still cold and he was scared of being alone. Then he asked if I could lie beside him. Felt so strange to me. I'm married, and here I was being asked to lie down next to my male friend. I hesitated, but Oliver asked again, and after thinking it over, I convinced myself it was just to help a friend in need. There was nothing to it. Oliver wasn't a stranger. We had been friends for so long, and he knew my husband knew him. There was no harm in it, right? So I climbed into the blanket with him and held him close. Looking back, I realized that was probably my second big mistake. We spent the night on the couch, and I could feel him pressing against me as we lay there. I didn't think much of it at the time, but by morning, everything felt off. I thought about going home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done something wrong, even though I hadn't done anything intentional. Oliver seemed a bit better in the morning, though still depressed. He thanked me profusely for being there for him, and I was glad I could offer some comfort. Later that morning, Oliver's ex-fiancée sent someone to pick up her belongings. That triggered another wave of depression in Oliver. He had a panic attack, his face turning red as he gasped for breath. I quickly helped him into a cold bath, which calmed him down. After he had eaten, I sat with him and gave him some advice. I told him he couldn't let one woman ruin his entire life. We talked for a long while, and when I saw that it was getting late, I knew it was time to leave. I had already spent the entire weekend at Oliver's and needed to return home to my husband. He asked if I could stay a bit longer, but I explained that I couldn't. He said he understood, and just before I left, he kissed me. I was frozen in shock. I didn't move, just sat there as he kissed me. After a few seconds, he pulled back and looked into my eyes. I wanted to ask why he did that, but before I could speak, he kissed me again, this time with more intensity. The kiss didn't stop at my lips. He moved to my neck and started touching me. I could have pulled away, but for some reason I didn't. I stayed there, letting it go on longer than I should have. Finally, I whispered for him to stop, pleading with him because I needed him to. I couldn't make myself pull away, but thankfully he stopped. He quickly apologized, and I told him it was fine. I gathered my things, said goodbye, and left. As I walked out of his house, I felt numb, disconnected from my body and soul. Even when I called for a taxi, I did so absent-mindedly. The drive home was torturous. I felt guilty, wishing the driver would take his time, but I couldn't control how he drove. When I arrived home, I got out of the cab in a daze, unsure of what to do next. Owen was already home, and as soon as I entered the living room, he was furious. He demanded to know why I hadn't answered my phone or come home the night before as promised. His questions came fast and sharp, and I struggled to find an answer. I hadn't even remembered my phone while I was with Oliver. I told Owen I had been busy looking after Oliver, who was in a terrible state and didn't want to be alone. He didn't seem satisfied, but didn't push further. That night, as we prepared for bed, I noticed how cautious he was around me. He was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. It felt like he was just waiting for me to confess. We went to bed, but things felt off. The next morning, I woke up to find Owen sitting in a chair by the bed, holding my phone, his expression unreadable. He asked me calmly what had happened when I was at Oliver's. My heart sank. I denied everything, repeating that I had just taken care of Oliver. But then he showed me a text from Oliver where Oliver apologized for what happened, saying he wasn't himself and hoped I could forgive him. I didn't know what to say. Owen knew something was wrong. He asked again, and I could feel myself suffocating under the weight of my secret. Finally, I broke down and told him everything. I saw the shock in his eyes as he heard the truth, and the anger that followed was overwhelming. He jumped up, stormed out of the house, and I was left terrified. I knew I had ruined my marriage, and now I didn't know how to fix it. A few days passed without a word from Owen. He slept on the couch, and no matter what I did, he wouldn't talk to me. At one point, things escalated when Owen went to confront Oliver. They fought so badly that the police were called, and both men were taken to the station. The situation calmed down, but Owen still refused to speak to me. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us was unbearable. He stopped eating the food I made, and it hurt more than I can describe. Owen, who was once so punctual and loving, was now distant. He came home late every night, and I couldn't stand the change. One day, after days of silence, Owen spoke to me, but the words he said felt worse than the silence. He told me that he didn't believe in trying to fix something that was already dead, referring to our marriage. I felt devastated. I had hoped for a second chance, but it seemed like he had already given up. Despite everything, I still believed our marriage was worth saving. I suggested therapy, but Owen refused. He seemed so determined that there was no hope left for us, and that crushed me. Now, I've decided to do everything I can to repair the damage I've done. I'm not giving up on us. I still believe in second chances, and I'm going to keep fighting for our marriage, no matter how difficult it gets. Thank you all for your advice. This will be my final update. Goodbye.